idea of responsibility, I think, is a core value. I mean, I think it is the core value of life. I think that when we come into this world, we're born, and we don't have a lot to do with it. We are dependent upon a whole bunch of folks that have a whole ideas about how we live. We're children, we're defenseless, we're helpless, and awful things can happen, which leave indelible marks on people. And when you find people who are addicted, if you look and read their case histories, you say, oh, well, I see why they became addicted, and it's not an excuse, but they were so painful because we don't do enough in this society, I think, to protect our children and not try to break their spirits. We don't allow our children to be, because sometimes we're bringing our own damage into it that is generational. I often say that if we could raise a generation of children who just have not grown up in homes with dysfunctional adults, and they ultimately become dysfunctional adults themselves, we would get out of a lot of the mess we're in. But regardless of what happens in your life, when you become an adult, you are an adult. You now have a responsibility to be a healthy, whole person who has learned to love themselves in spite of what they've experienced and pass that on to others. It's a responsibility we have when we talk about legacy. We talk about what do I want to be remembered as? Kind, compassionate, loving, and responsible. That regardless of what happened to me, I have no right to continue to heap that onto other people. I have to figure out what is my problem and deal with it and move on with my life. Otherwise, we will continue to turn out generations of dysfunctional adults because we heap it on the less empowered. We heap it on the helpless and the defenseless, and it's usually children. And it just goes on from generation. You see it and you start to say, this picture has got to change. And my responsibility, and I can give you horror stories of what happened to me as a child, but at some point, they're not going to happen to me anymore because I'm an adult. An adult says that I have rights, and I have ability, and I have capacity to change the order of my life and move on so that I can change the order of someone else's life. I mean, I think that's the core value of humanity. I think that when you talk about friendship and friends and family and colleagues, their responsibility is to tell me the truth, to never let me off the hook, to be my positive feedback mechanism that allows me to make different kinds of decisions, to feel comfortable in consulting them for advice and counsel, because no man is an island. We're not islands. We're intertwined, interdependent, across a variety of lines. We have this separatist notion, which is a bad idea, and I have early experiences growing up in the South, behavior toward me that had nothing to do with their being white. They just had to be human beings, and those were imprinted in my mind. It gave me a different view of my sense of the world at some point. So your responsibility to friends is to be there, but also not to be there in a way that is detrimental and harmful to the person. It is to be respectful and to have positive regard, and to be honest.
What about the responsibility of society, government, public sector, and how we fulfill it?
I think society, government, there's an issue. It's a word we use. And people say life is not fair, but I think it's a bunch of hype. Life can be fair. We have to look at the notion of fair and just. What are my rights as a human being? What are my rights if I go into the hospital and I'm in a detox ward and I have an insurance card, I don't have an insurance card, you're a medical profession. You have a responsibility to assume, to give me the best care because you're a medical professional. Long, short, end of story. It is not any more complicated than that. The government has a responsibility to see that its citizens have a fair shake at life. Whatever the problems are that beset us, that we need assistance with, it's the responsibility of government. It is not patronage. It is not who's on first. It's not the color of your... I mean, sometimes when you listen to politicians thinking through these problems, you say, these people are nuts. I don't, you know, whether you believe in affirmative action, I believe in justice, simple justice.
Is there justice in the society for the alcoholic?
Not yet. I think that the more there's limited justice for the alcoholic in society until the alcoholic says, I have a right here, just like any other citizen. And particularly if I'm in recovery, and there are a lot of movements going on now. There's a big event in Washington, America Honors Recovery. There's the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, which I worked in one time, talks about recovery, talks about the dignity of persons in recovery. It's happening. There's no justice because healthcare, employment, there's still discrimination. It's totally unfair. Because I'm in recovery 30 years. At what point do you stop believing that I am going to resort to use again? That's none of your business. I mean, you have to, this moment, judge me on who I am, where I'm sitting with you, and give me an opportunity. That's just the long and short of the story, as far as I'm concerned.